Hello, everyone. Welcome to this series of interviews with cybersecurity and ICT experts. Today, we have an academic, Katerina Yordanova. She is an ICT lawyer and lecturer on AI regulation at KULeuven, my alma mater, but also very important university here in Belgium. Welcome, Katerina.
Thank you, Eva. Thank you for having me.
Katerina, you're an expert on a topic that not everyone knows even what it stands by. European AI regulatory sandboxes. Can you tell us what does that mean?
Yeah, of course. Well, maybe some of your viewers already have heard this topic because it's been quite a buzzword in recent months, even recent years. But the truth is that very few people really had an idea what stands behind it, because at this point we are at the moment where it means everything and nothing. And that's, in my opinion, is not exactly the right way to use this tool, because it's actually a tool, that's starting point. So I'll try to briefly explain how it actually emerged and what was the goal behind it. So we have this in mind when we tackle the more complex question of what regulatory sandboxes for AI are. Now, how it came to life, regulatory sandboxes, so the more simple term, it became a thing after the financial crisis in 28. So in 2008. So what happened there in the UK was that financial regulation was not really at the point where it could manage the booming fintech revolution that was happening. So after the financial crisis, the regulators they realized that they needed better and stronger regulation, but at the same time, because of the financial crisis, they also needed to nurture innovation. So they couldn't hinder the fintech evolution. They needed to understand it so they can regulate it better. That's why they came up with this new tool that was called regulatory sandbox, and they created a safe space. That's what sandbox means. Even in computer science, it's a safe space where things and processes can happen that's isolated from the other environment. And that was exactly what it was when it was established in 2016. Um, what was the first sandbox? So we had the fintech, the financial regulator in UK, so the FCA. They came up with a set of criteria where financial products and services that are considered innovative can apply to this safe space, to the sandbox. And after they were selected, there was a testing process that was taking place. So the regulator was sitting with the company or the person who was proposing the service or the product, and they were designing this testing phase where they can figure out if this new product or service violates financial regulation, how, and can they come up with a way that it won't. On top of that, there was some incentives. So basically, what the regulator did was that they lifted certain rules, legal rules, in order for the innovators to be incentivized to test, and also if by any chance their product or service seemed not viable or not compliant to a point that they can't enter the market, they wouldn't waste time, they wouldn't waste resources. So it was beneficial for everyone. That's why regulatory sandboxes were and are deemed innovation facilitators. Now, this was how they came to being, and actually it proved that this tool was really successful, because in terms of just maybe 3 or 4 years, this regulatory first type of regulatory sandboxes for fintech, they spread all around the globe. So at some point we had like around 190 or 80, and they kept expanding, not only in the area of fintech, so they started appearing in other heavily regulated areas such as privacy or transport, energy, etc. That's how we came to the AI part, where now we are trying to figure out how they're going to work, because there's a big difference and distinction here. When we're talking about the traditional sandboxes, it was the regulated area or the regulated market, so the financial services. And when we're talking about regulated sandboxes for AI, we're talking about just sandboxes which test AI products and services without having into consideration in which market they are functioning. So it's you can test AI product that's designed for healthcare, and at the same time test one that's designed for banking, for example. So that's a challenge that I'm already thinking how we can address on national level, because it's not really that easy, and also one needs to think about how feasible it could be.
Very interesting. So despite the name, it's not so much about yes, it is a regulatory space that you could test the regulation, but is there any other elements tested in the sandbox? I'm thinking obviously in the security field, we usually observe also the security properties of items in the sandbox. Is that something also envisaged when it comes to AI sandboxing?
Well, yes and no, depends on the sandbox. But yes, there are certain sandboxes which offer additional technical testing capabilities. So they can accommodate a test bed of a sort. So in addition to testing if your product violates, let's say, privacy rules, you also test how it does, and then also when you come up with a mitigation mechanism, you can also test that. But also with time, there were other types of sandboxes that were developed. Again, going to the birthplace of regulatory sandboxes, the UK. So they came up with something they call digital sandbox. So it's a complement to the sandbox. I like to call it part of regulatory sandbox ecosystem or environment, if you wish. And the idea there was that you have this interaction with the regulator. You also have a testing, but the idea is that you get products and services that are in earlier stage of development. Therefore, there were other incentives that were offered, and in that case, those were, for example, data sets that especially small and medium-sized companies, they do not have access to them that often, or at least it's much harder and costly for them to get them. And especially in the area of security, I call this like critical digital raw materials in a way, although I guess it kind of sounds funny, but it's actually the idea is that it's really essential, but also hard for new players to get access to cybersecurity related data sets so they can adequately train their new products and services. And that's where actually a regulatory sandbox which provides data or offers kind of a intermediary space where they can connect innovators with the relevant providers of data sets can be really beneficial for everyone.
This is really awesome, especially I'm also working with a couple of startups developing AI tools for cybersecurity. And indeed, it's very, very costly to create. So what we do is usually we recreate the attack scenarios to be able to generate more data and see how the AI algorithm performs. This sounds very promising for European startups, but also a great legal certainty for the large companies, which would be able to get kind of a assurance that their products are okay for Europe. What about the state of deployment of these sandboxes? Are they a myth or reality in Europe today?
A bit of both, I would say. The promise was very big, that's for certain. And there's a lot of opportunities and possibilities using regulatory sandboxes. The thing is that um, we encounter certain problems in terms of how sandboxes are designed on national level, how much we can scale on international level, because that's definitely a challenge. And one of the major issues is that we have differences comparing member states. So to give another example, besides UK, obviously not part of the EU anymore, but let's say Netherlands, they do have good experience with sandboxes of various kind, and I know that they are currently working on how they should form and design their sandbox for the AI. So they do have a good starting point, but for other countries such as Belgium or Bulgaria, where we both come from, this is really something we haven't talked about. And in Belgium, well, we did talk about it, but that's where we are on the talking stage. And there are a lot of issues which are related, for example, to the division of competencies here in Belgium. In Bulgaria, we also have the problems with the fact we haven't really had any experience with such type of tool before, so we need to introduce certain changes even on legislative level. So that would take time. And at the same time, in the AI Act, we do have this obligation for member states to have operationalized sandboxes in 2 years' time, basically. So for some member states, that's doable. For others, it will be really a race against time.
And what is, I see the regulatory challenge, the competences. Is there a technical challenge? Is there technical capacity to enable this?
I would say yes. And to me, the most pragmatical approach would be to use already existing testing facilities, either like test beds or innovation hubs that offer certain testing capabilities. It's much easier to build on something that already established certain level of trust, first of all, and second, because the technical capabilities would be already there. And of course, because the driving force behind the regulatory sandbox would be the regulator. That's probably going to be the specific AI regulator, or in coordination with probably the privacy regulator. So the driving force would be the state. And the state, especially in smaller countries, we do not have the resources for the regulator to really organize technically all these things that need to be organized for successful testing. And that's why I think it's much more feasible to actually use something that's already there, and to rely with in partnerships with other stakeholders.
This sounds complicated. We have,
Mm.
yeah, we have seen that sometimes, obviously, you need tests to build upon, but sometimes there's particularities already in the specific setup, or technical, let's say, details that might still need to be fine-grained to enable the full capacity. But just last question on this, does that mean that startups or companies in countries which are a little bit slower in adoption would have this advantage? Would I, as a Belgian company, be able to go to Netherlands if I want to launch my product? Is there restrictions on that?
I believe that there should not be any restrictions. Maybe something that I need to mention here is that the AI Act does not really, I mean, there is regulation about the sandboxes, but the substantial part would come from an implementing act that the Commission is going to adopt, I believe, in the next year or so. So we are going to know more about it then, but the idea should be that there would not be any restrictions, because of course we are in the common market, but at the same time there might be some in terms of avoiding shopping for jurisdiction. So it is basically a balancing exercise. We don't want everyone to go to a certain country and try to test there, because also there's not the capacity for the regulator to address and to process all the applications. And the way that usually a sandbox is done, which is a cohort principle, I don't know if they're going to adopt that one, but this is just a small group of companies between 10 and 20, and that's not something that scales very well. So we definitely want to spread the testing capabilities to every member state. So I wouldn't say that SMEs would be definitely at a disadvantage. It's just that some jurisdictions may offer a little bit more, also in terms of certain relaxations of national rules. Really depends on the field and the specific regulation.
Very interesting. And if we go back on the topic, so we are AI regulatory sandboxes. We know that in Europe we have the first in the world AI regulation. Does that mean that we are leaders in a way for the specific topic of AI regulatory sandboxes?
Not necessarily. And the reason for that is that AI systems, products or services, they were tested before. They were tested in fintech sandboxes, they were tested in privacy sandboxes all around the world. The fact that now we have a comprehensive regulation means basically that we put another layer of regulatory burden. So we need to guide the companies how to navigate through it. So in that, we are definitely leaders. But in terms of guiding companies their products quicker to the market, maybe not really, because if we look to other countries, for example, Singapore, they are very much using regulatory sandboxes and other forms of anticipatory regulation in their highly developed technical sectors. And they offer so many more relaxations to the rules, so they basically can promote the sandbox and attract innovators, so they can test quickly, adapt quickly, and go to the market. We're just lagging behind, and I don't think that we can overcome this because we have very heavily regulated sectors, and sometimes the member states can't even if they have the political will to lift some of those restrictions, they can't, because they come from EU level. So of course they don't have the competence to do that. So what we can offer instead are better technical testing capabilities, what I mentioned already, access or facilitation of access to data. And yeah, that's basically what we can offer. We just need to adapt a little bit.
And do you see the readiness? Do we have the data set? Would we actually be able to release this potential of sandboxes for enabling development of AI tools? But I'm thinking obviously cybersecurity tools, which depend very much on data sets. Do we have the capacity?
I think that we do have the capacity, but I'm not sure if we have the organizational capacity. So we have so many initiatives like data spaces and all data, digital innovation hubs, all kind of things that are actually EU sponsored. So we should have the data. The question is more like how we design the ecosystem in such a way that actually we can use it for what it's intended to, and we don't just have data somewhere. We just need to operationalize this.
And what is the biggest challenge in the operationalizing this? Is it, again, you said organization, is it because it's different sectors? Is it because it's different authorities? Is it because we are different countries in Europe? What is it?
Everything because yes, everything at the same time, because when you have different authorities even in the same state, it is hard to coordinate between them, also because they have different mandates and different interests at stake. Of course, the privacy authority has one core mandate and the financial authority has another one, and at the same time we have these cross-jurisdictional challenges always, because of course when we're talking about testing, we talk about also liability and things like that. And liability is different in different states. Just give one example. So it's hard to coordinate this in such a way that actually the innovators would feel secure and see the added value to actually participate in the sandbox. I think this is the biggest challenge. And in terms of the data, again, looking at the digital sandbox and learning from their mistakes, so to say, it seems that when you're truly looking for innovative products or services, sometimes you're surprised by the data that you need. And um, there were in the digital sandbox in the pilot stage, there were cases where the data sets were just so specific that they just didn't exist yet. So it was it's really a matter of careful design and also priority for the member states, because you can't just have an AI sandbox and say, okay, now every AI products or services that are consider themselves innovative, please apply. That's not going to work. What you need, in my opinion, would be more subject-wise calls. For example, if we decide that healthcare is a priority for the member state, you try to design a sandbox, AI sandbox that at this moment or these calls is concentrated on healthcare and how AI can facilitate it. That's the more pragmatic approach.
I see. I concur that, and I would, of course, be interested to see also cybersecurity being prioritized, knowing that this is kind of infrastructure eventually to enable all, whether it's health, transport, critical infrastructure, anyways, sustainability and security. And I'm checking here, and I have a question for you for the European AI office that is currently being established on the European Commission, at the European Commission, and it will be, and I'm reading here, to ensure it will play a key role in implementing the AI Act by supporting the governance bodies in member states in their task, but also ensure strategic, coherent, and effective European approach on AI at the international level, becoming a global reference point, connecting with expert community, member states, and so on. Do you see this AI office as a potential link that would enable the organization better, or do you think it's is too little of an effort to make the difference in solving the challenges we discussed?
Maybe somewhere down the road it could facilitate the whole exercise. I at least my point of view is that we should start on local level. So I would say that these ambitions, they're certainly admirable, but considering the different state of play in different member states, I would say that we need to concentrate more on their individual development and implementation, comprehensive implementation of the rules of the AI Act on national level and even regional level at some points. And then we can look at this more coordinated approach, because otherwise you're trying to coordinate basically different entities. And it's just when you're working with big member states such as France or Germany, you seem to forget certain challenges that other smaller member states like Bulgaria, like Slovenia and so on, that we face and that are not there for the bigger players.
I see. So good to have, but later down the road.
Yes.
We don't have today AI coordinators. In Belgium, we have AI coordinator, but not necessarily sandbox.
No, the Belgian sandbox is still on a very early stage of development. Also, as I mentioned, because we don't have any other sandbox, so that's a challenge already. And so we need to figure out first how to create a sandbox in general, and then how to create an AI sandbox. So it's like a two-step challenge. What we have in Belgium currently, coming from Flanders, was this reflection paper that Evie adopted 3 months ago, something like that. So they basically advocated for an umbrella sandbox on federal level, and then local sandboxes that provide more specific services of a sort. which I don't know how it's going to work because it sounds like a lot of coordination when you put also the specific structure of Belgium having so many regulators for everything. We would definitely need a big hall where we can create all those talks about the sandbox, that's for sure. But yeah, there are certain things that happen. It's just we are not there yet.
Very interesting, but sounds very typical, right?
Yeah,
Let's
absolutely.
divide in a smaller pieces and we all come together and discuss and
Yes.
figure it out. So it's also cultural probably impact would have for each individual sandbox creation. Let's see where does that bring us, and hopefully we would have them in all member states so then we can then assess and draw conclusions, improve the efficiencies. But who would eventually be the biggest beneficiary of the sandboxes? I gathered companies, of course. Do you think it's bigger benefit for big or for small companies? Do you think regulators eventually are going to benefit most because they would be able to test their regulation, or maybe users, what is there for users?
It really would depend on how the sandboxes are created. The idea usually of a typical sandbox would be for the product that's so innovative to get to market as quick as possible, which of course benefits the companies and the users potentially. The things that some sandboxes that already exist have uh, their accessibility criteria actually exclude certain big players. So that would limit their impact to mostly small and medium-sized enterprises, which I think it's not unreasonable to do because the logic behind is, well, big companies, they have other avenues to test and to also communicate with the regulator, so they don't really need this testing. So that's one thing. I don't know if all member states are going to abide to this practice or if it's going to be abolished. I'm not sure, but to me it does make sense. Now, in terms of what the regulator gets, the way that the AI sandbox is designed is, in my opinion, basically predominantly for the regulator. But also here we need to remember that we can't really look at the regulator just like an abstract body. And that's a problem that I've seen addressed already, not in terms of the sandbox, in other context in the US. And that's the personal capacity of the regulator. The fact that you had the opportunity to work with this very innovative product, you tested it and so on. It's not even the regulator, it's the person who worked there. And considering that we all know that regulators can't really compete for talents with private sector, it's very probable that all those people who got this first-hand knowledge in their capacity as government public servants, they just switch their field and then go work for private companies. So with them, the knowledge just goes. Yes, it's probably documented, but it's different for you to read something or you have first-hand experience. And that's something I haven't really seen being talked about, but I definitely believe it's a huge problem, especially in smaller member states where the salaries for members of the regulators are really not competitive.
Interesting. We need also, typically we also need fresh blood. So there would be also probably a need for strategizing how to attract more more talent in the regulator to be able to cope basically with the more responsibilities, especially in the digital cybersecurity AI space. Very competitive, of course. How do you get the experts? Probably you have to train them. To be honest, that's what we see in some regulators. The effort is more basically revamping, makeovering of the people that know the structure, the governance. They're in their position to then take new responsibilities and new knowledge. Katerina, very interesting discussion. Thank you so much for sharing with us. We will be following up on your research. So you do currently make a research on the topic, right? What can we expect to read from you?
Well, yes, of course, because it's a legal research, so it also answers a lot of boring legal questions that are related to legal certainty in my particular case, and basically how it's affected, if it is affected, in regulatory sandboxes for AI. But in terms of practical results, what you can expect down the road would be a guide on how to establish a successful regulatory sandbox for AI. At least that's my ambition. And I do hope that it can already implement some of the lessons that we learned down the road, and probably help future sandboxes to be as effective as possible, because we should not forget those are public money that we invest in them, and quite a lot. So we actually do need good results that are useful for everyone.
Thank you so much with this wishful thinking. We are here to support. I invite the audience to comment, ask questions, or maybe feed in the discussion with your own experience or wishes. And if you're interested in the topic of AI, you could check our interview with Kai Zenner on the cybersecurity elements of the AI Act, but also testing is also security testing, a topic we keep an eye on. We have had interviews on pen testing, vulnerability management with Krasi. Thank you. See you soon.